Hello and welcome to episode 76 of the DX Mentor, a discussion about the most recent ARRL board meeting, as well as an update on the Huntsville Hamfest, an update on the happenings in Washington, and a potpourri of other ARRL goodies. My guests are Joe, WAGEX, and the CEO of the ARRL, David, NA2AA. I'm Bill, AJ8B. If this is the first time you're joining us, welcome. We have a back catalog covering many aspects of DX in both podcast and YouTube format. Please check us out. If you like what you find, please subscribe, like, and share to always be notified about upcoming events. Another way to keep in touch and to see what we're up to is via the DX Mentor Facebook page. I will be posting about upcoming podcasts as well as other DX events, so please follow us. You can check the show notes for any of the information that we discussed today. You may wonder what a discussion with the ARRL CEO has to do with an episode of the DX Mentor. Well, I think there are several things that link us together. First, the DXCC program is an ARRL program. You can't separate the two. DXPeditions exist because they have the funding, the need, and the acceptance by the DXCC Desk to be legal and will count towards DXCC programs, rewards, and acknowledgement. Secondly, there's no other organization that works to protect the spectrum like the ARRL does. There have been countless efforts to procure parts of our spectrum that have been defeated due to the actions of the ARRL. The current work to remove restrictions for homeowners is another example of the ARRL at work. Finally, David, NA2AA, is a DXer and a contester. He works the DX and is the DX. He is also a CW fanatic. So, he's definitely a fit for this podcast. Well, let's tune in as Joe and I discuss all these issues with David, NA2AA. Well, hello and welcome to a really special edition of the DX Mentor. I'm your host, Bill, AJ8B, and I'm with Joe tonight. And boy, are we excited. This is an opportunity that you don't always get to cut through all the fuss and the information and get right to the source. And that's what we always try to do here. And I know we're going to do it again tonight. Of course, I have Joe, WAGEX, and I have Dave Minster, NA2AA from the ARRL. But as we always do, let's start off with Joe with a quick introduction, and he'll pass it to David, and then I'll tell you what we're going to talk about.
Well, thanks, Bill, and hello, Dave. Nice to have you back on again. I'm just like you, Bill, tickled to death to have Dave on, and because how often do you get to talk to a CEO of any company? So, Dave, I'm going to keep my little thing short, and let's get started.
So one of the things we wanted to talk about, Dave, that I'm really interested in is the July board meeting. And I will tell you, until a year or two ago, to be quite honest, I never paid attention. I never really read it in QST. I never went on online. I just didn't. And then as I got to know Tom Sly, not Tom Sly, who's our director? I'm so
Scott
embarrassed.
Yonley.
Yeah, Scott and Tom Sly, who's my local guy. I got to know those guys pretty well, and I thought, they're doing a heck of a job. I owe it to them at least to follow up. So I've started to do that on a regular basis. But heck, I got you now, so I don't have to read anything. So
There you go.
So what can you tell me about the July board meeting?
Sure. Well, first of all, I thought that the July board meeting was very successful. You go into these board meetings and it's not always clear what the total agenda is because you have individual directors that may be working on motions or maybe talking to a couple of their other directors, kicking ideas around and seeing which way they land. One of the things I want to bring up that was from the January board meeting, which is the way that we started the July board meeting, was I presented to Mark Tharp, who's from the Northwestern Division, the only numbered DXCC Trident plaque. We're not serializing those plaques, but for him, because it was his idea and he ferried it through PSC, and he's been a super positive guy, and he qualified for DXCC Trident. We gave him Trident #1. I don't know if it's handy there or not, but I did send out to the great state of Ohio another. I know it's hard with the background there. Yeah, it's okay. But anyway, so you've got your DXCC Trident plaque.
Yes.
And we love the Trident program in large part because it's going to inspire people that don't operate all three modes to take on, one of the other modes that they may not be active on. Now I'm going to tell the story, okay? And I hope that I don't embarrass him, but he has he has a very good sense of humor. But my boss, Rick Roderick, K5UR, and if you go to Rick's QRZ page, you will see that he is a lifetime DXer. So if you're a DX fanatic, Rick has got to be a hero of yours. And you can see his DXCC totals. He loves to be the guy who's the last one in the room standing at these DX dinners, right?
Yep.
But in any event, so I called up Rick, and I like to bust his chops on occasion. Certainly, April Fool's Day, the gloves come off. But so I called him up, and I said, Rick, I made a decision, and I'm going to serialize the DXCC Trident plaques, even though we said we weren't going to do it, and I'm going to give myself number one. So I thought that would cause him to come right through the phone, right? It didn't. I was like, where's the explosion? Where's, there's like, this isn't fun at all. And then I said, wait a minute. Do you have DXCC digital?
Whoops.
He doesn't. So I said, now you can be inspired, even though he's not a big fan of FT8. He certainly has done RTTY back in his career, but he can be inspired to finish the digital side of his DXCC. But we also want to inspire those DXers who have the modest stations. The FT8 has allowed them to get up and over the DXCC hurdle, to try phone. Phone is tough with a modest station, or pick up a key. There's plenty of online resources to learn Morse code, and getting on the air and actually using CW is the best way to learn it. So we're hoping that the DXCC Trident will inspire people. So with that as a backdrop, one of the things that was passed, which I think is great because it's not something that I qualify for, is the 10-band DXCC. So now, rather than just having 5-band DXCC with some endorsements, this is a newly designed award. I think it's a really hard award. I've got 10 through 80 meters, no problem. But I'm a little bit shy on 160, only because I've only ever lived in places with small yards. So I've never really had the sort of the capacity to have a real signal or good ears on 160. And 6 meters, I've just never had I just have never had the fortitude to stick out, being there for hours waiting for some 20-minute opening to some weird spot in the middle of nowhere and adding another 3 to 5 countries, so I mean, from home, I don't even think I have 40 countries on 6 meters. But now here's a new award for me to I want that thing on my wall. Yeah. And so that's what we want to do is we want to be able to use these programs to get people excited. I saw, and look, it's a community that loves to generate criticism, right? But there was some criticism about the fact that it wasn't available in certificate form. And I go right back to a conversation that I had in Orlando with a guy from Southern California who wound up contesting with us on Bonaire. And when I said to him, are you an accomplished contester? You have experience. He said, yeah, I've got certificates all over the wall at home. And I said, that's the difference between you California guys and us East Coast guys is you guys like wallpaper, we like paneling. you know? So I guess there's a place for certificates, and I guess we'll need to take a look at that. But the intention was for these things to be, very special awards that represent sort of the highest levels of performance, and that a plaque was really appropriate.
Well,
So
I appreciate that. I've had mine over a month, so I put a little sticker on the back and it says #2 on it. So when I pass and my son finds it, he'll go, "Damn, look at that!"
he got #2.
I got #2. Different font, but
Yeah, it's great. Anyway, so we had the 10 band worked all states. Or 10 band DXCC. We've also got the let me see if I pronounce this right. Semi-quincentennial coming up next year, which is the 250th anniversary of the United States as a country. So there's a lot of, not the least of which the US, but also a lot of organizations that are doing special things next year for the 250th celebration. So what we've done is we've added for next year only. So unlike DXCC Trident and 10 band DXCC, which can be for some lifetime accomplishments.
sure.
The we're doing a worked all states and a worked all states triple play next year, which your QSOs have to start January 1st and end December 31st. And those will be, we're calling it WAS 250. There's also an opportunity for club stations in the US next year to be signing as W1AW stroke, whatever call district they're in. And we want to encourage people to be getting, all 50 states on the air. And, some of these states are actually pretty hard. Nebraska, for whatever reason, I don't know what's going on in Nebraska, but when I was in sweepstakes, I had a really hard time finding Nebraska. But we want to get everybody on the air with that. Next year, which is really big for us, is the year of the club.
Okay.
And one of the things that, as we look at amateur radio and as we look at ARRL membership, clubs are absolutely crucial. And there's a very strong feeling that clubs are like the main contributing aspect to the community within amateur radio. And we talked the last time I was on DX Mentor about this notion of community and looking out for each other and, being on your knuckles and knees and all of that. But having clubs that are strong, to have a great club doesn't mean that it's growing, but having a growing club can be very useful, because you're bringing in new people, new ideas. I can't tell you how many Hamfests we see that get canceled because the organizer's been doing it for 10 or 15 years and they're tired of doing it. And, they don't want to, they want somebody else to step up. And no one else steps up, and you've got that problem of volunteerism, that we addressed a few years ago with the year of the volunteer. This is something that is societal. It's something that's international. We heard about it. We heard about it in Paris at the IARU Centennial. We heard about it in Friedrichshafen when we were there in Germany talking to people. But finding volunteers is very, very difficult. IARU Region 1, I didn't know this until I was in Friedrichshafen, but IARU Region 1 this year, all of their officers are going to term out.
Wow.
And they don't have the next group of leaders for Region 1 to step into those positions. So they're having to work. Now they may now, it's been a few months since Friedrichshafen, but having a healthy club, having a growing club, bringing in new people, new ideas, even in a club with 100 people, a lot of times it's only 5 or 6 people that do most of the work, right? They're the ones that want to be the officers. They organize the events, they organize field day, they organize the holiday party. But at some point, those 5 or 6 people need to pass on the baton. So how do you do that? So next year, we're really going to be focusing on clubs. There's a program that was funded through the Foundation Club Grants program that was funded by ARDC. A local club here in Connecticut developed a program that they call Marconi, and Marconi is basically an approach to a club having lots of different activity areas where you can put someone in charge and have them do whatever it is: fox hunting, satellites, balloons, contests, field day, VE testing, whatever it is. But to develop a portfolio, an assortment of activities. And this local club, I don't have the exact numbers, but grew somewhere in the neighborhood of from, say, 70 members to 200 plus members.
Really?
Just a matter of a few years. Those kind of results are outstanding. So in any event, so those are the kinds of things that we're going to be pushing. There's going to be an opportunity for clubs with regards to their websites. We're going to pick a few websites, club websites that really, really need help. And we've got folks that can help with those club websites. But then we've also got clubs that have outstanding websites. So we want to take the opportunity to acknowledge those clubs. And we'll use QST as a platform to be able to communicate that to members.
Yeah, Joe, when you were doing fundraising, didn't you guys run into issues with all these different websites that they weren't updated? They didn't have.
Yes, yeah. Some of the big trips that I had been on, my wife and another lady did the fundraising, and you look at an ABC Club, and boy, you just go nuts trying to find out who the leader is, a phone number, an email address. So yeah, this would be great.
Yeah, and there's, the tools have advanced so much. I mean, there's a I don't get any benefit from shaming anybody, but there's a club that I absolutely love. And when I went to take a look at their website, it looks like they used a product from the mid 1990s called Microsoft Front Page to
Yeah.
do their website. And they've done tweaks to it for probably the last 30 years. Um, you know, I don't know, maybe it works for them. It doesn't particularly look great. Now, we've got there's some sarcasm around the ARRL website, which hasn't gone through a major update in a long time. The main reason why it hasn't is that ARRL spent a small fortune on, believe it or not, building its own content management system. And rather than just picking a commercial one, we're so special that we wound up building our own. And it's so integrated that pulling that apart and putting it onto a new platform is going to be quite an effort. But we're moving in that direction next year, taking a look at other association websites. In fact, I was just in Washington a week ago, and walking over to our lobbyist's office, I went by I think it's the American Association for the Advancement of Science, AAAS. Went to their website when I got back to the office the next day. And it looks like they use WordPress, but really beautiful job, really well laid out. One of the fascinating things to me was to take a look at the branches of the layers of their membership model. They go everywhere from supporter that costs $30 a year, which you get bupkis for. You're just supporting them, all the way up to their premium level, where you get everything plus the digital magazine plus the print magazine. You get everything for $230. And so in any event, it was interesting to see their web design. But we'd like to see what clubs have done. And we would like to pick out a couple of these clubs that maybe have one of these very old websites, and put it on it, help them migrate it to a platform that's very easy to use. It's very easy to keep it up to date. You're not having to monkey around with HTML code just to try to make changes to it. So in any event,
You
there's
know,
also,
the thing that they don't think about also, Dave, is the fact that if these websites are old, they are subject to SQL injection, all sorts of things. Now, they may say, well, there's really nothing in there, but I would argue and say if you have a roster in there, it's worth being reasonable and protecting. So, to me, it isn't enough to say, well, we just have a one-page website from 2006 and it's GeoCities. It's like, no, you owe it to the members to at least get it up to date, just to protect everything you've got in there. But I'm off my soapbox. That's just it's
Yeah.
kind
no,
of a
you're
point.
absolutely right. We have one division, one ARRL division that's had its division website hacked multiple times in the last since I've been CEO anyway. And in those occasions, they were redirected to not such nice websites. And it took work to be able to get back control over the website, where the actual URL was pointing, all of that. So that, it's it's something that's serious, that when you have a not so serious website, not that a club,
Right.
it's not a commercial website, right? It's for a group of hobbyists, but still, it's not the kind of thing that you want someone to be able to get into and monkey around with.
Correct.
Sure.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So another area for the year of the club next year, we're going to be taking a look at ARRL affiliated clubs. So we have, to be an affiliated club, you have to have 51% or more of your club comprised of ARRL members. There's a club in Arkansas, a DX club, that Rick Roderick belongs to. It's in their constitution. If you're going to be a member of the club, you have to be an ARRL member.
Mm.
And it's been that way for many, many years, as I understand it. But you've got clubs that are operating at the 70 and 90% levels, like they totally get it. Maybe once a year they'll do an ARRL night, for example, and they'll invite in their section manager, their director. They'll talk about all the stuff that ARRL is doing. They'll have a great evening, and then they'll do, I call it line up and sign up. They'll pull everybody together. They'll do their club renewals or new signups, and they actually get an incentive from ARRL to do that. So if you want to bring in coffee and donuts that night and want it on us, you just get you get $5 back for every renewal and $20 back for every new member. So it's a great way to have people in your club be ARRL members, and it's also reflected in the level of affiliation. So my understanding was we've never done that before. So the board for the year of the club would like to do that, to recognize those clubs for sort of exceptional performance.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Oh, let's see, what else have we got?
Huntsville.
Say again?
Huntsville.
Yeah, I'll get to Huntsville. I got a couple more
Oh, okay.
things
I'm
from
sorry.
yeah, I got a couple more things from the board meeting. One, I think both of them are big, but the last thing on the year of the club is that we're going to be working on a book next year for it's under work now, but a book for how to create and operate a high performing club. And, we hear this through people who say, they're out of ideas or whatever else. There's a lot of people, I'll throw some light towards a previous director at ARRL, Fred Kemmerer. He and his wife Anita with the Nashua Club, they've brought a lot of life and a lot of light to that club. And they enjoy a very, very large club. And the kind of learning that you get from sitting with Fred and Anita for 20, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever, and you go through and you listen to all of the different activities that they've taken on and what they've done. They can't talk to everybody, but if you can get folks like that to contribute a chapter or two to a book on high performing clubs, that's that's another important tool in the toolbox. So that's one of the things that we talked about at the board meeting, and that the board voted in support of. Sort of the controversial thing that it was controversial a year and a half ago. It was a lot less controversial 6 months ago, and it was like nothing now, is the changes that were made to Bylaw 46. You probably remember 18 months ago, it was the end of the universe, and
Yep.
there were all these, I don't know, taking a Nazi oath of loyalty. I mean, the comments were just bizarre. But what it really came down to is the board had decided that the way that the director responsibilities had been written into the bylaws before really didn't apply anymore. This was, I think, 2018, 2019, somewhere around there. And they voted to remove parts of that bylaw and had committed that in 6 months they would come back. Well, they never came back. And every effort to come back to address it was met with resistance. So in any event, so the board worked on it, came last January, January of 24, with the bylaw. There was a bit of unhappiness about the way it was written. It was too long, covered too much ground. So a committee was put together by the president, which comprised of 3 years of E&E members, plus our Connecticut counsel. And it was run by our International Affairs VP, who happens to be a judge in California.
Oh, right.
So a pretty capable group of people looking at sort of best practices in what the expectations of a director of a nonprofit corporation should be. They put it together, they presented it in January, and there was a sense in January from a couple of directors that they really hadn't had adequate time to go through it. They'd like another 6 months. So they were given those 6 months to take a look at it. Frankly, nothing changed in the 6 months, other than I think 2 commas and the use of association versus corporation or something like that. So I think there were 3 minor changes that were made. But in any event, so the board approved Bylaw 46. It wasn't unanimous, which is unfortunate. But not everybody likes having rules. So, but on the whole, I think when you, and I would encourage you to go to the ARRL website and look at the bylaws, take a look at Bylaw 46. I think what is there is not just reasonable, but really should be expected by members of anyone that's serving their association. The other thing that was introduced that, again, I think on the whole is very good, is that it's hard, and we've seen this. We saw this a few years ago with a couple special board meetings. It's very, very hard for the board to pass judgment on another director. And, it gets very emotional. And so there was a change made. I think it's to Bylaw 42 is where you'd find the language. But basically, what it says is that on matters of ethics, that an independent third party will be used to evaluate anything where E&E makes a determination that there's a problem. And then that third party will make a recommendation, will take their findings and recommendation to the board. The board still has the ultimate vote in deciding whatever action it's going to take. But I think it's useful and important that a completely unbiased third party, who may be an attorney, may be a mediator, we need to put together a list of potential people that we could work with on that. The good news is that these ethics things are few and far between. They're very, very rare. So I'm not expecting that there's any issues there. But anyway, so that the other thing that I would comment on that I thought was really notable was that we work with a law firm here in Connecticut, and there are 3 specialists that we work with. And one of them, who's actually a litigator, came into the board meeting to answer any questions around Bylaw 46 because her firm not only participated in principally answering questions for the committee when they were drafting the new bylaws, but they were also required from the January board meeting to write a legal letter demonstrating the legality of the bylaw changes that were proposed.
Oh,
And she came into the meeting and had a lengthy exchange with one of our directors. And I actually complimented the director after the meeting because, we live in a small world up here. Hartford's a small community. The last thing we want is for an attorney that we spend very little time with to come into a board meeting and walk out thinking that we're a bunch of clowns. He was very professional. She was very professional. They had a really informative and professional exchange, and I think it really set the tone for the rest of the board with regards to the bylaw and the bylaw changes, really, because there were 2 bylaws and I think 1 change to an article. So, kudos to the board with regards to the sort of professional way in which they handled it. So
it's kind of the thing you would normally expect, but you don't always get.
Yeah.
yes, when you sit in a regular board meeting, you could get worried about what it might look like if an attorney came in.
Yeah.
But it was very, very good. The other thing that came up in the board meeting, and it came out of my CEO report, and it's now shown up all over the place. I think it's all over social media. But the part of my CEO report to the board that was labeled Aries, the first sentence I said, Aries is broken. And we had a discussion in the board meeting about basically what I meant by that. And in that discussion, what I had suggested to the board was, if you look at the tools that are available today that are not amateur radio based, where do we have in our designed response plans the use of these tools? And the most obvious one, of course, is Starlink. So if an Aries group is going to deploy, and they're going to deploy in the parking lot of an EOC that's right next to a grocery store and whatever else, and they fire up a Starlink, what are they going to use that Starlink for to support their response? And with that, a director during a break went out to his car. This was Director Familio from the Atlantic Division, a division that is no stranger to, natural
Sure.
emergency situations. He brought in a yellow Pelican case that probably the best use of pluck foam I've ever seen, ever. And when he opened it up, there was a portable Starlink set up in there. And he carries it around in his car everywhere he goes. And Bob's a big MCOM guy. But where's everybody else? And so what I said, and this is sort of where the social media fodder has come from, is, Minster wants to destroy Aries and he wants to tear it all down. That's not what I said. What I said, and what comes from working at a big multinational like Unilever, is we used to talk about greenfield exercises, which is essentially, if you were going to start all over today, if you were going to start with a green field and you were going to build Aries, what would Aries look like? And instead of trying to tweak what Aries is, are there fundamental, even radical changes to the way that we structure our emergency preparedness and response capabilities. And so that's what I suggested. In fact, I've written a column that will be in the October QST that talks about, future proofing ARRIs. How do we make sure that ARRIs 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now is still going to be relevant? Because if you go and you read 200 Meters and Down, which is a book that was written 60-ish years ago,
Yeah.
um, if you read the MCOM section, it reads like today. So are we really saying that in all those years, nothing's changed? No. So,
Interesting.
so how do we do that? The other thing, and I actually call it cancer, because it's how bad it is that we look at an organization, a national organization like ARRIs, and we find the examples of really well-run ARRIs groups, and the conclusion is made that ARRIs is not broken because there's this whatever 5, 10, 20 ARRIs groups that are really outstanding. Well, I've gotten lots of correspondence and lots of in-person feedback from people since things got all wound up about my views on ARRIs, that people agree that they're within their groups there are fundamental problems that need to get worked out. And I think that with the leadership, you mentioned Scott Yonley earlier, and with Director Familio, Scott is the chair of the ECFSC, the Emergency Communications and Field Services Committee. With he and Bob working sort of at the lead to look at what a greenfield exercise might look like, and what we might learn from going through an exercise like that, how we could improve the sort of the future proofing of ARRIs. I have very high confidence in our ability to continue to deliver against that FCC 97.1 requirement. That we
Yeah.
essentially assert we support the public with amateur radio, especially emergency communications.
So let me go down a tangent just for a second because I
Sure.
run into this at work all the time. My guys will say, "Hey, I saw this on social media and we need to be doing this." And it's like, wait a minute. Did you research that at all? Did you read it? Are you just trying to what what is it? What do you think it is about social media that people take it as they seem to take it as gospel sometimes and boy, they get inflamed right away instead of saying, well, that could be an opinion. Maybe I should research it. Is there something? And I imagine that you hear a lot on social media. I'm hearing that in your answers. So what is it about social media that causes these challenges?
Well, it's a big question. And I want to start by saying that there's a lot of good that comes from social media. We partner with a number of the YouTubers that do I think, a really fantastic job at bringing content into the amateur radio community. Someone said to me recently that we've let the YouTubers eat our lunch. I don't view it that way at all. We don't own amateur radio. We have our areas of responsibility that we focus on, but bringing content creators, whether they're authors, or whether they're in this case they're sort of video authors, bringing them to the forefront and putting a spotlight on the good work that they do. It's great. I think it's great for amateur radio. The problem with social media is not an amateur radio thing. It has become it's just become a societal thing. And what that is, and I could go down person by person, example by example of what I consider to be bad actors who were doing it for, I don't know, pumping themselves up in the eyes of the community or whatever else. But the information that people get from these individuals is just dead wrong. I was in Orlando, and there were two people that came to me from a major contesting group on the East Coast, and they were sent over to talk to me from our director of development. And the one guy was so angry that he just stood there silent and grimaced the entire time. And the other guy was talking and was asking me these questions about things that he had read on social media. And I finally put my hands up and said, hold on. I need to say something. And he said, okay, go ahead. Said, aliens assassinated JFK. Okay? Aliens assassinated him. We've got their bodies. We've got the murder weapon. We've got their spaceship. Okay? There's no transparency, right? Transparency is a big issue. There's no transparency. So nobody knows the facts, but we know that aliens assassinated JFK. So he looks at me and he goes, that's nuts. I said, that is exactly what you sound like right now. Everything that you're saying, every question that you're asking is based on something that is total fiction. And there's a YouTuber who out west, he's in the Northwest, I think, who is generally a pretty good guy and does, pretty good videos. But if you take a look, he's got a couple of these videos that he's put up there. One is about Bylaw 46. One is about Bylaw 18, which had to do with elections. He has no earthly idea what he's talking about. And yet he pontificates about all the malfeasance that's been going on. He's wrong. I mean, not just wrong, dead wrong. And yet there will be people, hundreds, maybe more than 1,000 people that watch his videos that get all upset, and they're walking around in the world all teed off about, one of the comments he made was he likes the old version of ARRL. I would love to challenge him on what in the world are you talking about? Like, are you talking about back when members only got QST? Because you get 4 magazines now. Back before LOTW existed. I mean, I think we talked about this last time. There was a DX stamp bureau. You used to buy the stamps and get your SASE back like 6 months later for that one country that you needed for DXCC. You don't do that today. Now you spend $6 on PayPal or something and you get it in a day, right? Through LOTW. But, it's hard to fathom why somebody would do that, other than it's like clickbait. They want to attract a lot of people to their YouTube channels, so they have this fantastic nonsense. There's some sour grapes. There's a couple of people that ran for office last year, that 2 of them that were determined to be ineligible. One of them was like so clearly ineligible. It's not even a question why he would choose to go out into the world and appear on a YouTube channel to complain about the fact that he was found ineligible is utterly bizarre to me. Like, there's rules in place, and every candidate expects that the rules are going to work so that the elections are fair. But your application got in late, so you're gonna say that there's a problem. There's no problem. If you don't like it, change the rules.
Yeah.
Get your director to change the rules. You had another one who wanted to challenge what residency meant, and it turned into this big Megillah. There is no big Megillah. You either live in a division or you don't live in a division, and if you're going to spend half the year outside of your division, the articles are clear. If you quote unquote move out of your division, you're ineligible. But all of these things go out to social media. They all get the sort of the op-ed treatment, and it gets people worked up. We had a guy who used to be an ARRL employee who frankly should know better, who wanted a 1-by-1 call sign. Now, the W5YI website that manages the 1-by-1 call signs was down. So he went to our website and applied for the 1-by-1, and it failed. So he called headquarters and he got connected to the VE department, the VEC, and they said, for you to do this, you should call W5YI. Here's their information. He said, I don't want to use W5YI. I want to use you. And they said, well, we can't help you. You need to call W5YI. He went on Facebook and he posted that the people in the VEC are incompetent, to which an ex-director from ARRL was the first respondent who said everybody at headquarters is incompetent. And so, we have people in this building, despite me begging them not to read this garbage online in one particular forum online, which I think you and I talked about offline. So we went back to him and said, whoa, wait a minute. Why are you criticizing the VEC? They told you exactly what you needed to know. He said, oh, I get it. Okay, I'll post a retraction. It's like retraction. There's like 16 comments. Yeah. You're going to be the 17th comment that says, ignore my post. No, you can't do that.
It's a little bit like the cyber attack. No one knew the complexity of it. And, we're hearing things like, all the PCs at the league are running on Windows XP. And it's like, okay, I know that can't be true.
And that's not true.
But, you listen to that and it's like, oh, yeah, and they're using Foxbase as a database from 2001. It's like, no, all right, and they're using dial-up through CompuServe. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Well, we have a guy, and listen, everybody's entitled to their opinion. Sure. Okay. But we have a guy who is running for election right now in one of the divisions, who has the opinion that our communications during the cyber attack were lousy. And even though he has told me this, and I have told him that we received our direction from a law firm that we hired that specialized in cyber attacks, and a guy that we were working with at the FBI who's in their cyber division. Okay. We followed their directions, not to the letter. We actually over communicated, much to our attorney's chagrin. Okay. But we felt we had to put out something, right? He still thinks that what we communicated, we did a lousy job. That's your opinion. It doesn't make you right. It doesn't make you an expert in dealing with cyber attacks, threat actors, and how you respond. And you look at United Healthcare that got attacked around the same time we did. Go take a look at what not to members, to their shareholders. And as a reminder, a shareholder is an owner.
Yeah.
You own a portion of the company. You take a look at what they told their shareholders. They told them nothing. Because they were advised anything that you say could be used against you by these threat actors. Don't say anything.
Yeah,
and so they did.
Last thing you want to do is let them know that you're over a barrel and you're at their mercy, and then you got a real problem. Well, hey, a friend of mine always says you're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts. And I hear that a lot of what you're saying here. Well, let's switch a little bit because I know you've been traveling quite a bit, Washington and Huntsville. So let's talk about Huntsville. How was it? How was the weather? How was the Hamfest?
Sure.
And what went on down there?
Well, the good news about Huntsville is that the entire event's indoors. So the weather in Huntsville is always fabulous until you step outside. Right. So, it's usually hot and humid and there's occasional thunderstorms and all the rest of that. But Huntsville, I think they call the friendliest Hamfest. The crowd at Huntsville is always fabulous. Mark Brown, who runs Huntsville, and Huntsville Hamfest is not put on by a club. It's put on by an independent group of people. These guys work very, very hard, and they really do a spectacular job. I think that in terms of quality of equipment and variety of equipment, it might be the best flea market in the country.
Wow.
Ah,
I have seen really, really gorgeous equipment in the flea market. And they have a rich forum assortment. The local DX club there that does the DX banquet, they did it again this year in a private museum that an individual built with his own money, but it's called Signals, and it's a communications museum. So there's a lot of old broadcast AM radio equipment from the sort of the 20s through the 40s. There's old computer equipment there. There's modern amateur radio equipment there. There's all kinds of stuff there. But the DX banquet was there, and I thought the banquet was excellent. One of the things that we did at Huntsville from the board meeting was we recognized ICOM, and in particular Ray Novak from ICOM, for their contribution to our Dream Station promotion that's still going on. We're very, very happy with the results of that so far. We still have a few more months of the year to go through. But one of the things that we're able to measure very clearly is that there are people that buy or get extra entries into the sweepstakes by making donations to Diamond Club. And so the number of individual donors to Diamond Club went up quite a bit this year. They're smaller donations. They're, $50, $100 donations, things like that. But the number is reflective of the program. So we're really, really thankful to ICOM for all of that. The ARRL forum, didn't disappoint. It's always interesting. A couple things from there. We talked about membership, the membership numbers, and some of the factors that have been impacting membership. One of the things, and it's disappointing, right? It is what it is. But every time ARRL in the past has taken a dues increase, a certain percentage of the members vote with their feet. And they get teed off and they walk away, and then 2 or 3 years later they'll come back, right? This was a little complicated because we not only took up the dues, but we restructured the dues. And so a benefit that has been a free benefit for many, many years, which is the print version of QST, now you're paying for the paper and postage. It's still not a moneymaker for us by any means. In fact, funny story, that this is an Ohio story. It comes out of Dayton, right out of Xenia. I had a member come up to me and he said, "Hey, the girls at the table told me to come and see you." And I said, "Sure, what do you got?" And he says, "I am really teed off about the fact that you're charging for print QST." I said, "Okay, but you do know that you get the digital for free." And he said, yeah. And so we got into it and we talked about using the app and if you want to download the PDF. And, he said there are certain articles that he wants the printouts of. And I said, "Well, you do know that you can print out, any article out of digital QST. In fact, you can print out the entire magazine if you want to." And so he was telling me that he's on this HP ink subscription thing that costs him, I don't know, something like 18 cents a page to print a color page out. And he says, "Do you have any idea how expensive it would be for me to print out a magazine?" I said, "Yes,
yeah.
I know exactly what it costs. It is really expensive." And I said, "Look, if you think that's bad, I want you to print out a QST on your color printer, put it in an envelope, go down to the post office and mail it to yourself, and multiply that by 12 and tell me what print QST costs you to print." I said, it doesn't cost us anywhere near that, right? Because we're professionally printing it, and we get a break on postage. But after we had that conversation, he goes, $2 a month is a bargain. I said, I don't disagree with you. I said, but you know, we also talked about, because he lost out on CQ magazine. And we were talking about CQ magazine. You know, when we were at $49, MPS losing money by providing members with both the print and digital versions of QST. You know, CQ magazine was at $63 for the digital and print, and they lost money and wound up getting into a situation where they had to stopped printing the magazine. And then, you know, sadly, Dick Ross passed away, right? And you know, I think for all intents and purposes, that's probably the end of CQ.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
you know, trying to run a business on a magazine model, the old magazine model, is a loser. You just can't do it. The advertisers have lots of different options today. They're not reliant on magazines. And the advertisers that do advertise in magazines recognize that there's a loyalty factor, and the fact that when a member is going through a membership journal and they see that color ad there, it sort of elevates them. Everything's on the internet, everything's on eBay. But today, if you want to stand out, a way to stand out is to advertise in a membership journal, because there's not that much traffic around you, and you make a big statement with people, in our case, who are active in the hobby. So in any event, we talked about membership and QST. There was a member actually that came to the booth, and it spurred a conversation. We have members who have never logged into the new version of the website, and when they get renewal notices and they try to log in to renew, the login fails, so they just give up. This was sort of another aspect with regards to declining membership, is the fact that these are people that had 3-year or even had a couple 3-year memberships back to back, who are now trying to get into the website. They can't get in because their old password doesn't work with the new system. They're frustrated.
Sure.
And so, you know, one of the things that we need to recognize is, despite the fact that, you know, we're looking for the digital transformation of ARRL, there's a certain part of the population of our members that don't want to engage digitally. You know, they want to be able to send in a paper application. They want to be able to talk to someone on the telephone, or they want to come up to a booth at a show like Huntsville. We were in Marlboro this past weekend. And, you know, the number of memberships that we took this year versus last year is higher. So, you know, there's no short of interest. But one of the things that came out, which, you know, we really didn't think about, was this portion of the membership that may be struggling or not interested in using the website to renew their membership. So it's going to cause us to create a renewal program for lapsed members, where we really target them to either use a paper application or call headquarters if that's more comfortable for them.
Yeah.
Good.
The last thing that we sort of talked about in the ARRL forum to some extent is that there's confusion about the division convention grant program that's run by the foundation. And I think it's worth a couple minutes, just in case your members are curious about how this works. I mean, Xenia, Dayton, Hamvention, it really doesn't need our support, right? It's big, it's there every year. People expect it. I mean, I've been going almost every year since 1980. You know, the first time that I went as a student at Ohio State, right? So there was a discussion at one of our administrative and finance committee meetings about the idea that every member would want $1 of their membership to go to support Hamfests. Well, there's a few problems there, not the least of which is every member, for every member dollar, that goes to about 45% of the budget. There's another 55% that we wind up having to spend to support members that the members don't cover.
Oh.
So the whole notion of pulling a dollar out of membership dues is not logical. But anyway, we said, all right, let's sort of roll with it. So we create a fund with $150,000 to support Hamfests. There's about 20, it's a big number. It's somewhere around, I'll use a conservative number. There's about 2,600 Hamfests in the country, or the 2,600 affiliated clubs in the country, most of which, maybe all of which, have Hamfests. If every single one of them was looking for funding, you're going to burn through that money in a New York minute, right? So where the discussion went was talking about big events, big convention, division convention level events like Xenia, Orlando, Huntsville, Pacificon, CPAC, Marlboro. I mean, there's more. That's sort of 6 that pop right off the top of my head. And one of the things about those is that they're in the same place. It's the same time. People are able to put it on their calendars. It's very predictable. So if you're in a division, about the best thing you can do, it's easy to talk yourself out of it. It's easy to say, I've got a big geographic division. I need to rotate it between 3 or 4. You can do that. The problem with that is that if you do that, none of them become important. They're all regional Hamfests as opposed to one that services the entire division, where you're going to throw the sort of the weight of the division behind that one event.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about discriminating against other events. It's about how do we make one event in our division important enough that every year people put it on their calendar and they show up. So the board approved $150,000 for the CEO, yours truly, to implement a program to support division conventions. So there was a director who didn't like that and made some editorial comments that caused me as CEO to move the $150,000 to the ARRL Foundation. The foundation has a grants committee. They already 3 times a year do grants, ARRL Foundation grants. They're the ones that for a couple years received $500,000 from ARDC and ran the club grants. So doing division convention grants, it seemed like was a good idea. So the Foundation Grants Committee came together, put together a set of guidelines, and the guidelines reflect what the foundation believes leads to strong annual events in a division.
Okay.
Well, some of those rules are pretty tough. Like it calls for, if you're going to apply for a grant, that your division director should already agree that for the next 3 years, you're going to be the division convention. So that there's an effort to make your event important. Well, we've relaxed that as a grants committee, and the committee has the discretion to do that. But anyway, so there were questions in Huntsville about what are the rules, that there was an allegation that no division has received a division convention grant, which was not true. And so we went through the divisions that received grants, and just talked about it. It is a program that is pointed right at division directors. This is a tool for directors to use. This isn't something where we run advertisements in QST to make everybody aware of it.
Right.
It's a way for division directors to support events within their division. And they know where the information is. It's open and it's online. They know where the applications are. They can help the clubs with the applications and they can get the money. So in any event, so we went through that in Huntsville to sort of dispel the fact that there were, whatever issues. The other thing that I would say about Huntsville, other than the fact that it's a really fabulous venue, is that next year it's going to be our national convention.
Oh,
So we're really going to be putting the spotlight on it. We're looking at doing an event at Marshall Space Flight Center, which is right nearby, which, if you've never been before and you're traveling down with some of your local friends, or maybe you're going down with your spouse, add in an extra day so that you can go and take a look at all the rockets. And these aren't models. Take a look at these rockets. Take a look at the kinds of things that you would see in the Air and Space Museum in Washington. They've got there, and the people there in Huntsville are just absolutely fabulous. So we're looking forward to a great convention next year.
it sounds like a great fit, actually. So then you jumped over to Washington.
Yep. So on my way back, I spent a day in Washington, and the sort of the purpose of going to Washington was to get to a point where we're ready to launch a grassroots effort with our members related to the two bills that we have already introduced in the Senate and the House. And we have two lobbyists in Washington. Washington is a place now where there's an aisle and there's one group on one side and one group on the other. So you got to have a lobbyist that talks to the one group and a lobbyist that talks to the other group. And so I think we're very well represented there. And so this is the third year in a row where we've had these bills in Congress. And and believe me when I tell you, the chaos that's been going on, that's been introduced, if you look at this year with the big, beautiful bill and all of the negotiating and conversation that consumed Washington over that bill, a lot of the things that are going on in Washington, it's really hard to get people's attention. But I think our lobbyists have been doing a really capable job. But you'll see in the coming few weeks that we'll be going to members to get them to participate in a grassroots outreach to their senators and Congress representatives to throw their support behind these bills. And what's the importance of the bill? The importance is that where the FCC protected certain types of antennas in restricted neighborhoods that have to do with commercial, over-the-air television and radio and satellite TV, with the small sort of direct TV satellite dishes. It offered no such protections for amateur radio. And so we've been working now, actually for a long time. There was an effort to pass through some legislation called the Parity Act, ARPA, and our lobbyists I told our lobbyists what I knew, they told me what they knew, and they were talking about the fact that we were inside the 5-yard line and ready to score, and we decided to pull that legislation back. The sense was for some people that the language or the narrative is that a bad bill is better than no bill, and so rather than do that, an effort has been made to pass a bill that works. So that's where we're at. So you will see in the coming weeks a lot of activity, a lot of energy around getting members to do outreach so that we can show our representatives in Washington that this is something that's important for us. And hopefully we get the bill through, both houses this year.
Well, that would be quite an accomplishment. So overall, I know one of your main focuses is to work with the ARRL board on a regular basis. What's going on with that group?
Well, it's interesting, right? You and I have these sort of we've done 2 of these now. So we have this sort of pre-meeting, and the board keeps coming up, right? It's that people think that there's something going on with the board, that I don't know. We were talking about social media before, and you come away with these stories that there's sort of the good guys and the bad guys, and all of that. I wrote down some notes here because I really didn't want to miss anything. You'll see that in September, QST, I wrote a column about making your vote count. And it's important to understand what the roles and responsibilities of a director are. And I'm the first person to say, when I was an ARRL member and just a member before I was a CEO, I didn't care about any of this. If I had to take an ARRL membership test, it would have said, how many directors are there? I couldn't answer the question. How many vice directors are there? I have no idea. What officers are on the ARRL? I have no idea, right? You don't even know. Right. But where you start, and it's really important when you take a look at who you want as a director, you have to think about the kind of job that a director has. Is the director an advocate for amateur radio? Like, do you feel better being around a director that's talking up amateur radio and talking up the good work of the ARRL? Or do you want to spend your time with somebody that makes you feel bad? For me, it's a hobby, right? I remember when I was a club member in Northern New Jersey, a couple clubs, Steve Mendelson was a guy that I met who, I guess in the fullness of time, was maybe a section manager and then ultimately a director. I think he even had designs on being president. Maybe he was a vice, I don't know. But all I knew is that when Steve showed up, he was a very serious guy. He was very knowledgeable. He was involved with the New York City Marathon and providing amateur radio communications for the New York City Marathon. He was, I thought, as just an everyday guy, I thought that he was absolutely fantastic. Now, I don't know what kind of a director he was, but he made me feel good about ham radio. He was working for ham radio. He took the time out of his schedule to come to my club meetings. Our section managers over the years would show up. And I mean, when they would show up, it was like a serious night. These were serious people. These weren't people that we threw rocks at. These were people that we looked up to. We were really proud that our club got picked for these guys to spend time with us. So, that was really the inspiration for me writing the column in September. Is we've got an election coming up. Now, not every division are there people running. So the incumbent is going to serve another 3 years, which is great. But, how long should someone serve on a board before it's time for somebody else to take a turn? Right. Now, you guys in Ohio, and I was spent some of the best years of my life there living in Central Ohio, right? But when I became CEO, the guy who was the section manager from Ohio reached out to me. In fact, hold on a minute. Now, you couldn't do it with Trident. Let me see if I can do it with this.
Back up. There you go, right there.
Right there.
Oh.
The Ohio section with a Buckeye,
Yeah.
right? Scott Yonley was the section manager. And he wrote me a really nice letter and he sent me a mug to just as a reminder, hey, remember us out here in Ohio, right? And so Scott became vice director and now he's director. But let me tell you something, Scott is a guy, people don't know this, but Scott is a guy every September who comes to headquarters and for our new section manager orientation, he teaches them the best practices of being a section manager.
Wow.
This is a really, really good guy. You know, you look at Scott's, if you're not connected to him on Facebook, every single week, the guy is at a club meeting, he's at a Hamfest. He's so approachable to members. He runs the ECFSC committee. You know, this is starting to sound like a Scott Yonley commercial, right? But the guy is really great. So now let's talk about social media. A guy that you know that's in your division, okay, approached me formally because he wants to have a vote to recall Scott Yonley.
Huh.
Why in the world would you want to recall Scott Yonley? Because he didn't like the way that Scott voted on something. It's like, are you kidding me? This is one guy who wants to stir up trouble because he's unhappy with something. So he's going to go after Scott Yonley. And I've said to Scott, I'll tell you what, when Scott runs for reelection, if I have to take a leave of absence, I will. I am going to support this guy every which way from Sunday because having lived in Ohio, I know the way Ohioans think, which is, you know, we don't put up with a lot of BS. You know, you call a spade, and you know, Scott's just an incredibly good guy. You are so lucky that you've got Scott Yonley as a director. And I'm glad he's not running this year because I couldn't have said all that great stuff about him because I'd be influencing an election.
That's right.
Right. But you know, when you take a look at your director, I mean, those are the kinds of questions you should be asking. But navigating the board is difficult because you've got 15 directors and you have 15 vice directors. Now the vice directors don't get a vote, but they're an important element to our committees. And when you've got a group that big, just statistically, how many people do you think out of 30 people are not going to get along with the rest of the group?
Oh,
Sure.
Statistically, you're going to wind up with a handful, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
It's just the way it works. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so members that look at votes and see a 10-5 or 11-4, they immediately run to this place where there's this minority and they're locked out and they have no voice. They do have a voice. They're able to talk about whatever they want to in a board meeting. There's no stifling of ideas. But with some of this stuff, there's process. It's like one of the things that I got asked about in Huntsville was we have a director that put forward a bunch of motions. I don't remember how many, call it 4 or 5. I think all but one of them got referred back to committees. What does that tell you? It tells you that's a director that didn't want to work with committees. So he brought his ideas straight to the floor. And the board said, wait a minute, you should have brought that up to that committee. So we're going to refer it to that committee. So I'm told that in Marlboro, one of my all-time favorite social media guys. I mean, this is a guy that's committed hundreds, maybe even multiple thousands of hours to writing negative emails, has accomplished nothing, and really could have put all that time to doing good for amateur radio. But, you know, let's put that aside. His view was, oh, the board referred those to committee to kill them. No, they're not referred to committee to get killed. They're referred to committee to get discussed. And if they determine that there's any merit, and I know of one that there's absolute merit to, the committee is going to work on it. And that's the process. So, you know, all of these conspiracy theories about uh, cabals, and oh, my favorite has to be the shadow board. So, and I know you and I talked about this last time, right? So there was a shadow board. Now, I actually printed out and was going to read it. I'm not going to take the time to read it, but the long and the short of it is my understanding of a shadow board that's backed up, and your listeners or viewers can go and do this for themselves. But a shadow board is basically an informal board that a formal board creates with young members to try to educate them and get their fresh ideas into the boardroom. Okay, that's what it is in short. But the way that shadow board is used in our social media environment is that there's something evil going on, and there's black robes and I don't know, sacrificial lambs and all this other stuff. Now, there was a time, and this actually came up in a January board meeting a couple years ago. There was a time where there was a reflector that was by invitation only that talked about ARRL governance issues away from the rest of the board. There were people that were not on the ARRL board that were included in those email discussions. And, that's the kind of thing where if a member said to me, I think that there's something shady going on with the board, there's no question that to me is shady. Now today, right, this was something that came up at Visalia last year is people in California are really hot to trot on these sunshine laws about the fact that, their public officials have to minute every conversation that they have, which I don't think is actually true, but it's in the neighborhood, right? I asked these guys, if before a board meeting, 4 board members sit down in a pub and have a burger together, because they do, and they're talking about ham radio and even the board, the meeting that's coming up, are you suggesting that they should minute their dinner?
Right.
And they said, yes. And I said, no, this is a private corporation. It's a nonprofit corporation. And we're under no obligation to do that. And why would you think something nefarious is going on if a group of board members get together, whether it's over coffee, a burger, a beer, getting on a Zoom call, having a conversation before or during the board meeting, going off into the corner? Rick Roderick talks about the days where they used to take a recess and go out to the picnic tables behind the hotel to have a knockdown, drag-out discussion about a controversial issue so that they could come back into the board meeting, to do the business of the board. There's just, I don't see anything nefarious about it. And, but anyway, there are people that like to put that spin on it. And, I don't see it. Elections, right? Did we talk about Bylaw 18 last time I was here? I forget.
I think we touched on it.
Yeah. So basically, this was something else that that I've seen on social media is people saying that, including this YouTuber from the Northwest who did a whole video on this that had no earthly idea what he was talking about. But if you look at what was done with Bylaw 18, there were a couple of important things that were done that shouldn't be lost on members. The first one is that Bylaw 18 governs our elections, okay? A bylaw is pretty serious stuff, and it requires more than a majority of the board to pass a change. So instead of 8 votes, you need 10 votes to pass a change to the bylaws, right? So you need 2/3 of the board. Well, that's all good, but there was a web page on our site that dealt with election rules and regulations that were not referred to in the bylaws. And anybody could make changes to that page. And we're all looking at each other like, how do you even make a change to that page? And it was suggested that headquarters had the right to make change. I said, we're not making changes to election rules without the board's approval. But if you get the board's approval, in theory, because it's not a bylaw, it only takes 8 votes to change
Okay.
a rule or a regulation that's on this web page. So it was like, first of all, that's got to stop. So whatever's on that web page, other than maybe the timeline, informational things associated with the election, anything that looks or feels like a rule or a regulation needs to move into bylaw 18. That happened. Okay.
Okay.
Now, there's other stuff that happened that had to do with the previous year's election. We saw for the first time someone try to do a national GoFundMe fundraising campaign for a division level election. And it caused a stir among members saying, is that right? Why would somebody, for argument's sake, why would somebody in the Midwest care about somebody in New England getting elected or not and donating money to a campaign against another person who doesn't have access to that money? It doesn't feel right. I mean, our definition of a level playing field is every candidate gets to write a 300-word statement. That's a level playing field. Everything outside of that is outside of that. And so it needs to be managed. So, so that was dealt with. There was a lot of mudslinging last year. And, people don't see the number of complaints that E&E gets from members. Because you know what? They don't want to see this.
Right.
They don't want to get a piece of mail or an email from a competitor bashing another competitor.
Yeah.
It's ham radio. What's fun about that? Nothing. So the board decided to put in a rule that said during the election period, you can't bash your competitor. But they left a loophole. If you guys want to get together for a debate and you want to get in a room together and you want to take the gloves off, knock yourselves out.
Literally.
You go right ahead. There were candidates that used national email groups to politic for a division directorship. That didn't go over well. There were people that said, why is this guy putting this junk in my mailbox? So we said, if you're going to run for an elected office at ARRL, you can't use things with national reach to essentially campaign for a division level appointment. You have to use things that are targeted at your division, not the whole country, because guess what? The whole country doesn't want to hear about it.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
So, these are things that were born of complaints from members, conversations with members, and just in some respects, just common sense. I talked earlier about, about the question of residency.
Yes.
Nobody wanted to have to put that into the bylaws, but somebody made a big deal about it. And rather than make it another issue for another year, you make the problem go away by clarifying it within the rules and regulations. It's not that didn't exist. It just wasn't clear. Now it's crystal clear. And that's really what bylaw 18 was intended to do. There's nothing nefarious around it. Now, like this YouTuber did, it's very easy to get up on your soapbox and start throwing rocks because you think that there's some kind of conspiracy behind it. But if you spend 5 minutes with the facts, and you get out from behind whatever lenses you look at the world through and just try to look at it logically, I mean, I'll put it to you. Does it sound logical to you?
Well, it seems to be, yeah, without doing any digging. So, We always use in accounting, they use the reasonable man test,
That's right.
right? And they say if you go to a reasonable man and you say you have an accounting system that allows you to approve and print your own checks, does that seem reasonable? And the reasonable man would say, well, no, it doesn't.
Oh, right.
So a lot of this to me fails the reasonable man test. So
That's right. Um, we talked about bylaw 46 before. That was sort of dragged out there as being some kind of a conspiracy thing. There's no conspiracy. I think that it's good governance. We're in this sort of strange place where you hear from people, "What have you done for me lately?" Like a membership association is supposed to create new benefits, new this, new that all the time. I worked for a bridal jewelry designer who every year introduced new engagement ring designs. Now, what you may not know about engagement rings is that most people go with what's called a Tiffany setting, which is a basic setting, and they buy the biggest stone they can afford because it's got the biggest impact.
yeah.
It's not busy. It's a big stone on a ring. It looks great, right? And I said to him, because I didn't come from the bridal jewelry, I came from the luxury jewelry goods market. I said to him, why? I mean, an engagement ring is such a small palette to be designing on. Why do you design so many new designs every year? He said, it's not for the consumers. It's for the salespeople behind the counter. If they don't feel like there's enough newness, even though the consumer won't pick it and will pick just a basic setting like a Tiffany setting, you're doing it for the salespeople to sort of keep them engaged.
Huh.
And this sensation around, what have you done for me lately? What's the new products? What's the new this? What's the new that? The fact of the matter is that most of what we do that's really important is we run a business that protects amateur radio. And again, despite the social media to the contrary, we have an attorney in Washington. We have a full-time employee in Metro Washington, D.C. that's involved in ITU committees. We are constantly working to watch what's going on and where necessary to put forward statements, formal statements that are filed, and to work the back channel, to be able to work with the network of people in the FCC and ITU, in the IARU, looking for support for amateur radio. We work those channels. And the other thing that we do for members is we provide content. And we work with authors to create content. And we try to create excitement through not just author-driven content, but also things like Radio Sport, where the content becomes listings of who the winners were, certificates. You go on to LOTW when you log into the home screen. At some point in time, someone decided that it would be fun to put triple play, the serialized triple play, up on that screen. So if you earn triple play, you just got it, you're going to see your call sign and your serial number up on the home screen of LOTW. But that's really what we do. And this notion that, for example, we should own YouTube content, or we should be a major producer of YouTube content, that's really not in our wheelhouse. We do produce content. We do produce Facebook, YouTube. We've got learning center videos that we work with. But there's a really good example. There's a guy, Walt Hudson, K4OGO. He's got a channel where he tests antennas out on the beach. Lives down in Virginia Beach. He spent some time in Poland. He just spent a year in Rhode Island. And he produced a lot of content. He was going to produce a PDF of his antenna designs on graph paper. And I had our book acquisitions editor reach out to Walt and they worked together on a book of antenna designs. Now, I don't know what it is today, but right before Huntsville, it was the #1 book in radio engineering on Amazon.com.
Wow.
And people absolutely love what I'm calling a lifestyle book. It's about Walt. It's about him going to the beach and you know experimenting with these different antenna designs. And we even took an element from his YouTube channel where when he was in Rhode Island, he ended the videos by trying out different clam shacks, lobster rolls, whatever it was. So we introduced him covering off some of his favorite places to eat while he's been on his various journeys. People loved it.
Yes.
That's what we do. We promote and protect amateur radio. And if you look at the columns that I write every month, my columns are intended to inform and inspire members. It's to inform so that you understand a particular issue, what's going on, whatever, and it's to inspire you. And it's to inspire you to take some kind of action to be radioactive. Our board is very supportive of that. Our board, like any board, is not perfect. But I have to tell you, and I could go down, not just Scott Yonley, I could go down through the board and tell you people that are absolutely spectacular and that we're lucky to have them on the board. In my column, my September column, to sort of keep it out of the director realm, I talked about our two treasurers, the treasurer for the ARRL and the treasurer for the ARRL Foundation. These are deeply experienced business leaders, finance leaders, lifetime of financial experience, and the results speak for themselves. These guys they're absolutely fantastic. So I just, you can't stop the nonsense on social media. You certainly can't get into a mudslinging battle with these guys. One of the people this weekend in Marlboro, after being challenged about all the hundreds of negative posts the guy puts up, said essentially, prove me wrong. Well, prove me wrong is an invitation to a mud fight.
Yeah.
You bring your facts, I'll bring mine, and we'll see who wins. We're not interested in that. There's no benefit. And you've seen this with me. There's no benefit in us putting a spotlight on anybody that we think is doing something wrong or something bad, whether it's a board member or an ARRL member or somebody in the community. We get no benefit from making people feel bad about being in amateur radio. We want people to be excited as we are at being in amateur radio, and inspire you to stay involved, be involved, and get more involved in the hobby. And that's what we do.
So are you optimistic?
I am optimistic. I have to tell you, when you go to these events and you see the ARRL table, it's a buzz. I mean, at Huntsville, for the first 3 or 4 hours of the event, there was a line, 3 lines at the table, people coming up to renew their memberships, to talk about why ARRL was important to them. Kristen McIntyre, who's the first vice president, Rick Roderick's son got married, so he wasn't able to attend. So Kristen came. The two of us had really fabulous discussions, met some really great people. And we're also very inspired by the number of young people that we see coming into the hobby. Just this past week, there was a young lady in the Pacific Northwest. Her name is Gertrude. She's 7 years old, and she passed her technician test. And, that, to me, that's really exciting. I tried to get my son into amateur radio. I mean, he's in his 30s now. He's going on 40 at this point. But, back when he was 5 years old, I taught him Morse code in a weekend. and started to get him into the theory. And he didn't show any interest in the theory, but he loved CW. He loved being able to sit and send CW. Um, but to see someone that young be able to go through and hang in there with, the rules, the regulations, the sort of the basics of the hobby, so that she can do amateur radio with her mom and dad is fabulous. We have a teacher on Staten Island that's licensed. I, I'm My number is always behind because this guy is so prolific. It's well over 300 students. Okay. The last number I heard was 403, which is
Really?
monster.
Well,
Yeah, but these kids are interested in these. They're not Baofangs, but there's a certain brand of handy talkie from China that you can hack the firmware, and these kids are hacking the firmware. They're doing mesh networking. They're playing with Meshtastic. They're doing all kinds of stuff. And what they look at amateur radio as a hobby as is not what we look at it as, which is not what our predecessors who used to use Spark Gap and send messages 15 to 20 miles and set up skeds so that you could relay a message across a state or across the country, through knowing who the next station was in that direction. And what's funny is if you go back to the very first years of the handbook, when Handy was writing these handbooks for the ARRL, he's got a section in there where he talks about the fact that, they viewed their avocation very, very seriously. And there was the language is something like there's no excuse for missing a sked. You have to show up for your sked so that you can pass traffic in both directions. So anyway, I'm very positive on the hobby, and I feel supported in that when I take a look at a company like ICOM that just came out with the 7300 Mark II. It's clear they're listening to people. It seems like everybody's wish list got answered with
wow.
the 7300, other than mine. I wanted them to put 2 meters and 70 centimeters on it, so it could be a satellite rig too. But
Yeah.
let's see what the future holds. And I look at DX Engineering. The investment that the ownership of DX Engineering has put into acquiring brands, working with other brands, the inventorying of aluminum, so that like the Bencher series of antennas, they manufacture those. I had a pixel loop back when it was called a pixel loop.
Yeah.
Right? It's a Mobius loop. DX Engineering continues to sell that loop. It's a receiving loop. In fact, they were very generous in donating one to the ARRL lab within the last year. So these are companies that are businesses, right? And they're investing in amateur radio because there's a good reason for them to invest in amateur radio. Look at Flex. Look at the work that Flex has done on the Aurora, right? 500-watt radio, key down for 1 trillion years. The thing runs cool, but if you walk up to the if you walk up to the dummy load that's got all the big fins on it to keep it cool, you're going to burn your fingers touching it. All of that innovation tells me that there's a direction, there's not so much an acceleration, but a continuing of momentum within the hobby. And probably the only thing, it's really funny because I feel sort of both ways on this topic, is I look at POTA, and the POTA guys will tell you we were there first with the national parks on the air, which wasn't easy, by the way. There were people that got thrown out of national parks and all the rest of that, right? But when that group approached ARRL, our response was, well, we're done with it. If you want to take it and run with it, good. So I'm sad that we didn't run with POTA, but I have to tell you something. The group that does POTA, does their website and everything, they're fantastic.
Yeah, they're very, very good.
Yeah.
They have done an absolutely beautiful job, and frankly, probably a better job than we would have done.
Yeah.
So again, we don't own amateur radio, but the fact that we inspired people with the national parks on the air program, which led to a program now that's just, yeah, it's wildfire and it's fabulous. Uh,
I can't believe the people that are out doing it. I can't, and it's got them all
Yeah.
active and it's got them up and going, and all of that is good.
They generate a lot of activity.
Yeah. So, David, if you look at your notes, did we leave anything out?
I don't think so. I think we
You did a
pretty
perfect
covered
job.
everything.
All right, Joe, did I leave anything out?
No, no, you two guys did great.
Yeah, I think the one thing that some of the members were curious about was DXAC, the committee, and I don't know that
Yeah.
that's a topic we want to cover today,
It's
but
really, it's actually, it's a great topic. I'm sorry that I didn't have it on my list. Let me cover it in a couple of minutes here. So the DXAC is a committee, if you don't know what it is, that basically has one appointed member from each of our 15 divisions. So each director appoints a DXer of some import to sit on that committee. And they review issues associated with the DXCC program. Now, how important is a DXCC program? Let me tell you how important it is. If DXCC didn't exist, if the competition for growing your DXCC totals, whether it's DXCC towards honor roll, or like for me, it's DXCC challenge, whatever form of DXCC excites you. If DXCC didn't exist, do you think somebody would spend $1.5 million to go to Bouvet?
well, no,
Why would you go?
right.
So DXCC is a critically important program for amateur radio. Has a lot of heritage. Um, it has a rich history of people that have frankly risked their lives. We know that the one Spratley expedition, there was at least one person who was shot dead as
Yeah.
they tried to get to the island. So that this is no joke. The last Bouvet, you had, I think it was 3 members that wound up getting onto shore, and the waters got too rough for them to be resupplied. They didn't have a tent. They had nothing. And they basically had to huddle in place for a couple days until the weather calmed down so that they could be resupplied. I mean, this is some serious stuff. So we take, and the community takes, DXCC very seriously. So the DXAC exists as a subcommittee to our Programs and Services Committee, PSC. DXAC exists to sort of be the caretakers, if you will. Now, there are people that say that the DXAC is toothless, okay, that they can't do anything. I will tell you right now, I don't agree with that assessment at all. Earlier in the year, when we were dealing with some issues related to Mount Athos, I contacted the DXAC and said, we want your opinion on the direction that we're going with this. And we just lost Lou,
Mhm.
N2TU. Really, really great guy. Such a gentleman. He was so important on that phone call. Such a thoughtful, great listener, thoughtful guy. But that's what we wanted a group of mentors that we could talk to that would advise us. And the outcome of that discussion was fantastic. Now I'm going to tell you, with everything that I said about DXCC, this group, this committee, and many, not a few, many people do not want changes to DXCC. They don't want deletions unless it's literally gone from the face of the earth. So the day that Scarborough Reef no longer has reef, then it'll come off the list. But until that day, it's still on the list. Um, I've heard a lot about Pratis, about, it's basically a Taiwanese Air Force base that the Chinese overfly every day to tell them who's in charge. Are they going to put Pratis on the air for ham radio? Probably not. Okay. But unless and until, that's still going to be an entity. Now, there are younger people amongst us who, I say younger because I'm in my 60s, right? There are younger people who have been working on DXCC for a couple decades now and are within reach. Like me, I'm at 315. Not that I chase it rigorously, but these are people that chased it rigorously who can't get that last handful or so to get to honor roll.
Yep.
And they don't think they're ever going to get there. And I know that the Northern California DX Foundation has offered an award or of some kind of funding.
Yeah.
If you're prepared to put, I think it's one of the top 20 most wanted,
Correct.
according
Yep.
to Club Log. They'll help fund your expedition, which I think is great.
Yes.
Right. But there are certain places where you absolutely cannot go. We've had an interesting dialogue and a not so balanced dialogue, to be perfectly frank, with a German operator who's been going to Turkmenistan. And, he's sort of publicly bashed us because we won't certify his operations. Well, it's really simple. We won't certify his operations because he has nothing from the government that says, A, he can use the call sign Echo Zulu stroke, his home call sign. And he has nothing that says what bands, what modes, what power levels, nothing. He has absolutely nothing from the government. He's got a letter of invitation, which, P.S., everyone that visits Turkmenistan needs a letter of invitation. Okay. But he doesn't have anything. So unless and until that happens, we can't certify his operation. That regime in Turkmenistan is remarkably repressive and has been compared to North Korea. Do I think North Korea and Turkmenistan in the coming few years are going to embrace amateur radio? No, I don't think they are. Might they someday? Yes. When is that someday? Who knows? Okay. But when you look at DXCC along the timeline as a whole, which DXAC does, they don't want to change the rules. They don't want to change the list unless they're required to. And you've got other people. There's a club in Virginia that has written letters to board members and to the DXAC, very passionate about trying to soften the rules with regards to the entry level for honor roll, and taking a hard look at, the countries that are required to get you there. So the one thing that we concluded in the last board meeting is that the DXAC does not communicate with members enough. It doesn't talk about what topics they covered. It doesn't talk about the decisions that they made. It doesn't talk about their perspective or their views on anything. And so the board liaison to the DXAC, David Norris, who is the director from Delta Division, he has committed to work to improve the visibility to the things that are brought up in front of DXAC and the decisions that DXAC makes, in conjunction with whatever those issues are.
Yeah. To me, there's a couple points because number one, people have invested years and tens of thousands of hours and tens of thousands of dollars to get to a certain point. And it's not palatable to look around and say, oh, okay, now they've changed it so other people can get to the same point more quickly. That my argument to that would be, though, one of the things I like about DXCC is that, I'm looking at my cheat sheet here. I'm at 326. I've got a number more mapped out, but I'm not going to hit honor roll. So it's like that's okay, because if I hit honor roll, it's not going to knock Joe off. Or if Joe hits it, or he's on it, but let's say you hit it all of a sudden, you're not going to knock me off. So that's kind of cool. It's not like there's, eight pieces of pie and the first eight get them. There's room for everybody.
Sure.
So I really can see both sides of it. What irritates me was that we had N1DG on a podcast and we talked about Jarvis Island. And I don't want to get on either side of that, but what irritated me was I kind of committed to Don. I would send these emails out to these DX clubs. And I got a couple back from that had been forwarded to certain DX committee members. And basically, they weren't really interested in discussing the merit. It was more of it's been like this and it works. You need to leave it alone. Well, that bothers me. If you want to tell me I'm wrong because of this and this and this, I can accept that. I'm okay. I'm a big boy. I understand. I read it. But just to tell me it's been like that, we're not going to change. Well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We've had Spark Gap, So again, I don't want to get into it, but that is something that's always kind of irritated me. But so I was curious, just curious.
Yeah, I don't think that that is necessarily, first of all, I don't think that that's worded right. I don't view, after meeting with them and seeing the way that they went through the discussion on Mount Athos, yeah, I don't view them as being these guys that are totally uncommitted to change because it works, and if it works, don't change anything. If you look in the fullness of time, we've certainly added countries. I mean, I had one. It was pretty funny. I had some paper cards that I found in a pile of bureau envelopes going back years that I just shoved in a shoebox, and found them at home and opened them up. And I had a card from Kosovo, and so I included, I don't know, I had maybe 8 or 10 paper cards that I put into DXCC here. And Sharon comes back down the hall later in the week and hands me back my cards. And she goes, "Yeah, this one doesn't count." I said, "Which one doesn't count?" She did Kosovo. I said, "Well, why doesn't Kosovo count? That's Marty Lane on there. What do you mean Marty Lane doesn't count?" No, he went there 2 years before we certified Kosovo as a DXCC entity, right? So we do certify new entities. We have removed, was it Kingman Reef? One of those reefs we pulled off because, it basically was underwater.
Yeah.
There was, other than being there at low tide where there was like a strip of sand visible in the water, it's over, right? So you
Yeah.
take it off the list. So I think that they believe that the process works and that the process doesn't need to change. But that, when you go to take a look at how the rules are applied and whether there should be changes or not, I think that they're open-minded to listening. But, every single year I get an email, and I don't know what month it is. I could go back in my emails and tell you, and I'll shoot you a copy of one of them so you can see it. Every single year I get a package from 4U1A. Now, these guys used to be 4U1 VIC, right? The
Right.
Vienna Information Center,
Yep.
but they got a better call sign now. So they're 4U1A. They want to be an entity. I have to tell you, if I was in charge, which I'm not, and I say this all the time, right? I run the business, but I'm not the board. But if I was in charge, if it was my program, I'd have no problems adding it. You've got the Vatican, you've got the United Nations,
Yeah.
we've got other entities that are like that. But the DXCC rules changed some years ago where the decision was made. Buildings does not an entity make. Okay. When Bob Nauman, when Bob Nauman, W50V, worked here, God bless him. he and I would get into these discussions and he'd get all heated about the rules, the rules, the rules. I said, the rules, this is not physics. This is not the rule of gravity. Okay. This is not some God created scientific rule. This is a man made rule that men can change. And he was like, no, no, you can't change the rules.
Yeah.
And he was one of those guys that believed so much work has gone in to the rules, the process, and everything else. You can change the entities, but you can change the entities only in so much that the rules support it. And so again, the DXAC, I don't think that they feel the love. I think that they're one of those groups that has a whole lot more rocks than Valentine's Day cards sent their way. Uh, but they're, fundamentally they're a group of good guys. They're really well intentioned. They work very hard. They get together every month. The thing that's missing, which Director Norris is going to work on, is at least giving people the visibility to see what it is they're dealing with. And the fact that they really do have the programs, although it may not sit well with everybody,
Right.
they have the program's best intentions at the front of mind.
In full disclosure, Joe and I are real good friends with Mike W0VTT, who's
Yeah.
on. He's the Minnesota guy, and
Yep.
he has been very positive. He's been very patient with me when I express views, and he explains it, and I'm fine. So if everyone's like Mike, I would feel better. But I mean, you had to take me through the ARRL website to find out who my guy was. So, you're right. The information's not necessarily out there. I do wonder how much benefit they've done to the DXCC challenge because I feel like I have a much better chance of really finishing well I'm sorry, not the DX Marathon. I've got a
Mhm.
much better job finishing this year in DX than I'm ever going to have make an honor roll. So if I have to put my focus somewhere, that's where it's going to be. But that's just me. That's just me.
Right. Well, it's what I love about the DXCC challenge is that, like with 10 band DXCC, it challenges you to work on your station's capabilities across many bands with many different types of propagation and challenges with regards to things like atmospherics, susceptibility to local noise, um, tight, heavy band conditions versus quiet band condition. There's all kinds of things that come into it.
Yeah.
But I've really enjoyed starting all over again with a remote station down on Bonaire. So I broke through DXCC Challenge 2000, which I felt good about
Sure.
with my modest. I mean, you're talking about 100 watts in a wire. That this is not like one of these big W2RE stations in Maine that people are building, right?
Yeah.
It's 100 watts in a wire. Um, but I started all over again not long ago on DXCC Challenge from Bonaire, and I'm up to almost 1200, which again makes me feel good. I want to get to 1500 before the sunspots really fall over. But I've really enjoyed, like, the guys that went to VP2 VI.
Yep.
I worked them on 10 through 160. I don't think I worked them on 6, but I've worked all kinds of DX on 6 meters from Bonaire along the equator, including Singapore, Sri Lanka, a bunch of Africa, a bunch of South Pacific VK9DX, 5 Whiskey 1 Sugar Alpha, a couple FK8s on 6 meters, which with 85 watts. It's crazy. Crazy fun. And you know what? Ultimately, that's what all of this is. When you put all of that stuff that we've talked about aside, amateur radio is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be something that you enjoy doing at your own station, you enjoy doing with other people at field day or a POTA activation, or like me, a multi-op down in Bonaire with a bunch of guys that I like winning contests with. So yeah, that's what it's all about.
All right. Joe, anything else?
And it's great to make fun, isn't it?
Sure.
Yeah, I do it every day. I love it.
All right, guy. Well, David, as always, I know your time's valuable, and we really, really appreciate this. And I think it's great to uh, get the behind the scenes look, try to get the information out there,
For sure.
and educate everybody. So I appreciate your time. That helps me out a ton, and I know Joe was looking forward to this as well. So I sure appreciate it.
Thanks a
Well,
million, Dave. Been very, very informative. We appreciate it.
yeah, and I thank you guys because I like the down to earth questions, the real questions that your club members pose to you, and we're able to use this podcast and this YouTube video as a mechanism for them to be able to sit in the room with us and see that their questions were thoughtfully considered and hopefully we addressed it. And if we didn't, let's give it another 6 months and maybe we come back to it after the July board meeting if you want to.
Well, I think what I'd really like to do is get with you this fall when you've got your remote station firing away and not talk about ARRL stuff, but talk about operating remote from Bonaire. I think that would be very interesting.
Yes,
Absolutely.
definitely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
Love
Well,
to.
thanks very much. Have a great weekend. And well, heck, it's only Monday, but have a great week and then a great
Have a
weekend.
great
And
week.
yeah, my head's everywhere else but where it should be, I guess.
All right, guys. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thanks
Yes,
very
sir.
much.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye
All
bye.
right. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
I hope you found that as fun and as interesting as I did. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the DX Mentor. I would like to thank Joe, WAGEX, and especially David, NA2AA, for taking time out of their busy schedules to be on the podcast. I would also like to thank you, the listener and the viewer. Without you, there would be no reason to do this. Independent about how you feel about the league, and perhaps David, I would suggest that you still support the league. And I have three main reasons for that. First, the Spectrum Defense Fund. Our spectrum is always at risk, and the pressure is only going to get worse. We do need a collected, protective voice. Secondly, the ARRL's involvement with various issues and Congress. The work on behalf of the hams and the HOA restrictions is a great example of the need. Finally, the DXCC program itself. If there are things that you have questions or concerns about, contact your director. Most directors I've talked to indicate that the number of hams that contact them are a small percentage of the population of their area. Don't just sit back and lob grenades. Get involved. Send an email. I would like to thank our sponsors, ICOM America, the Daily DX, DX Engineering, and the Southwest Ohio DX Association. You won't find anyone more committed to DX than these sponsors. I would love to have your feedback, answer your questions, and provide help with any DX or amateur radio issues that you may have. If you need clarification on something, or you just have a question, email me at thedxmentor@gmail.com. Please drop me a line if you've achieved an all-time new one, received recognition, or you have a DX event you would like us to mention. We would be happy to do that. And as always, if you're enjoying these DX Mentor episodes, please hit the subscribe button. If you want to follow us to get updates on future YouTube and podcast episodes, as well as DX events and DXPeditions, please join the DX Mentor Facebook group. 7-3 for this episode, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to see you in the pile-ups.